It's Sprouse. Dr. Sprouse, how are you this morning?
Great.
Doing good?
Here. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. Your first time on our show. Your second only podcast.
Correct.
And that's good to know.
One thing about what you said at the beginning,
Yeah.
in the medical field, we like to call them medicines, not drugs.
That's true.
semantic.
That's true.
And at the doctor's office, it's not the waiting room, it's the lobby.
The lobby.
The semantics of that make all the difference
That's true.
in the world.
That's true.
Of
The
course.
lobby.
Of course.
Yeah, there was lots of medications that were dropped off.
Good.
So that's good. I'm medications. It's funny, like you get in your point in your life where you like start taking medications all the time, and you know what? Surprisingly, a lot of them work very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Sprouse, how long have you worked here in Kerrville? How long have you been in this practice?
33 years.
33 years.
My family and I moved here 33 years ago and joined Family Practice Associates.
Uh-huh.
And I've worked with a great group of doctors there for that full length of time.
And you decided very early then, to get on the school board and
Yes.
run for the board. What was the idea for you to serve on the Kerrville Independent School District Board of Trustees?
Well, at that time, I was in my late 30s,
Mm-hmm.
and I decided it was as good a time. I actually read a book called Halftime. It's
Okay.
by Bob Buford.
Okay.
And it talks about the subtitle of that is Turning Your Life from Success to Significance.
Okay.
Now, I say that not to try and toot my own horn that
Right.
I've done anything successfully or significant, but it got me thinking about there's something else I can do in addition to trying to be a good doctor and establishing a good business and a good practice.
Right.
And I chose running for school board.
So halftime, though, so that's a little bit of a football analogy. Is that like when you say, okay, I've done this first half, and then I'm going to do a second half, and sometimes the second half is better than the first half.
Better and longer,
Long-
hopefully.
yeah.
You don't have to wait until you're halfway through your chronological life to determine that. And that's one of the premises of that book.
Interesting.
The sooner you determine that this is what I want to do and get to your quote-unquote halftime, the better.
Right.
I'd encourage anybody who hasn't read that book. It's from the probably early, mid-1990s.
Okay. All right. Good to know. And it's always interesting to hear people who have had the process of writing something like a book or something along those lines, because that's a different level of admiration. That can be a painful process. And I write every day, but the idea of writing a book is daunting to me. You got on the board, and through the years, there's been a lot of changes in Kerrville Independent School District. I hear a lot of good things about the district just from kind of watching from the outside. I don't have school-age children anymore, but what is your assessment of where the district stands right now?
I think the district stands in a great position, and that's due to hard work by lots and lots of people.
Right.
I've played my role, but that's a very minor role. You think of how hard the students are working,
Yeah.
how hard the teachers are working, the administrators, the parents who support those students and teachers. It's all a team effort.
Right.
But I think the school district stands both from an academic standpoint and a financial standpoint in a very, very strong position.
This has been, I've said this before, this has been one of the most unusual periods of time in our lives, obviously with COVID-19 and the dramatic disruption that happened to students and teachers. One of the best stories out of it, though, was the way that this district, and other districts too, to that effect, pivoted during that period. What was your assessment of that time?
Well, spring break of 2020 was when that happened.
Right.
And basically, the kids never went back to school during that whole length of time. Hindsight being 2020, it sure would have made sense in Kerrville
Right.
for the kids to be in school then, but nobody knew that at that time. It was every day the information and understanding increased exponentially.
Right.
Our district administrators and teachers took one additional week, and then by a week off for spring break as planned, one additional week of no teaching kids out of school, and then the very following week, kids were being taught virtually.
Right.
And it was like turning on a dime like that.
Yeah.
And that was to tremendous effort by our teachers and administrators, and obviously students and parents too.
Because there was that concern, technologically whether or not it could even be done, and it got done, and there was all these great plans that happened, and we kind of saw hey, if this ever happens again, hopefully never happens again, that you can pivot, that you can do these things. But
the old saying of necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
How many more meetings do all of us have now over Teams or Zoom when we used to drive there and meet in person?
Right, exactly.
So some good has come out of that.
do you, one of the assessments is that there is sort of been a gap though in learning, and that some students are behind. Obviously, that bears out in some of the metrics that you look
Absolutely.
at. How is that going to be fixed, and how is it going to be addressed, do you think?
Our district is well aware of that. Our district, I want to say a couple of things about how proud I am of what everybody involved has done.
Yeah.
High school graduation is a very important event in the life of the student and the life of the parent.
Right.
Our district, even in spring of 2020, had an in-person live high school graduation.
Right.
One of probably a few in the state of Texas. We had other school districts who had a later graduation date calling Kerrville ISD asking, how did y'all do this? How did you do this, the spacing, and how did you accomplish that? But that was something that our district administration knew was very, very important
Right.
to the families and the students, and wanted to see that happen. So I'm very pleased with that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one way to keep people out of that is say we're going to have our graduation in the middle of August, about 1:00 in the afternoon or 3:00 in the afternoon, and outside. But Kerrville did it in the evening. It was beautiful. It was
or drive by and the principal hands you the diploma through the car window.
Right.
And you can only do what you are capable of doing. But our district thought that it was very, very important to have that as an in-person event done safely, and it was a great success.
I always struggle with that idea. Like I remember my senior year of high school and how keyed up I was, for the spring, and because that was my sports time and the prom and all that other stuff. To have all of that gone, it was just so, those memories are just so gone from that.
Very, very unfortunate. You mentioned earlier about lost learning, and absolutely there is no question there has been lost learning. In-person instruction, there's no substitute for that, I don't believe. The online instruction done in the spring of 2020 that was just created on the spur of the moment was not nearly as good or robust as what was offered, not required, but offered in the fall of 2020 when we were one of the districts in the state of Texas. Certainly not all of them did. Most in San Antonio did not offer in-person learning again starting fall of 2020. We still had probably at the beginning of that school year, fall of 2020, probably 20% of parents chose to keep their kids at home and do the virtual learning through the school district and not be in person. But as that fall semester of 2020 went on, more and more came back to school because our teachers are great, but they are better in person than virtual.
And I think one of the things that a lot of people would agree with too is that that virtual piece. Like I know that I have my own ADHD issues, so I can't even imagine, when the kids are like at home and trying to stay focused and there's no accountability. I watched my grandson do it. He did a pretty good job of it, but I was always waiting to see if his brother was going to come and whomp him at some point, because there was always that level of distraction, no matter what, no matter how you tried, it was difficult.
The burden on the parents. I'm a parent. I have a full-time job. Well, I've got to be a full-time teacher now also.
Right.
The burden on not only what our district was doing and challenged with district employees, but the burdens on all the parents were tremendous, and that's why I'm so pleased that Kerrville ISD was one of the districts, contrasted to many, if not all, in San Antonio, for instance, as an example, that went back to in-person learning that very next fall.
So, yeah, exactly. And then COVID ended up being a disruption and a problem, but not the kind of problem that it was really mild on children for the most part. I mean, I think there's
thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. I know, knock on wood on that one. It was disruptive, particularly at Tybee High School, which is kind of like our ground zero for it, which isn't really surprising, considering kids and stuff. What is the biggest misconception of being on the school board?
I would say that many folks would think a member of the school board kind of has some authority to run things or be in charge of things, or could go to a campus and talk to a teacher and tell an individual teacher they like or do not like what they are doing, or a principal at a campus they like or do not like what they are doing. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
The school, by state law, school board members have zero authority over anything except when in a publicly called meeting.
Right.
And they have authority as a whole, but no authority as individuals. And I think that over my years of experience, I've had parents who call me and think that I can take a direct action individually myself and cause something to change. Anytime a parent calls me, I always want to hear what their concern is,
right,
or their praise, because
yeah,
that happens a lot too. And I always pass that information along to the superintendent, and I suggest that the parent, if they haven't already done so, talk to the teacher, talk to the principal, kind of go up the chain as it were. But I always pass that information along to the superintendent, so the superintendent will know what's being said and what's going on in our community. And
mm-hmm.
our superintendents over the years have wanted to hear that, and I think been responsive to that.
Right. There's been a lot of schools right now are kind of in the crosshairs for a lot of different reasons. And one of them, I saw yesterday that he was on TV. It was Kirk Cameron was like saying
mm-hmm.
schools are evil. You know, public schools there's a lot of evil going on in public schools. You're seeing some of that kind of percolate here where you have people who are asking for books to be removed. There's the whole debate about critical race theory. What is your assessment of where we're at with schools right now? Is there a problem or not?
I'm a conservative person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Kerrville is a conservative community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The people who are teachers and administrators and school board members
mm-hmm.
Come from our conservative community and are conservative.
Yeah.
CRT is something that has not been taught in Kerrville schools. Matter of fact, the last legislative session, the state forbade that CRT could be taught
mm-hmm.
in public schools.
Right.
The state, through the Texas Education Agency, has certain requirements of what must be taught, but certain exclusions of what cannot be taught, and the state legislature did that job
right.
for us, you could say. But it was never our intention as the school to do that, as the school district, to do that type of thing. Anyway, I see what on social media or on television of things that are being done or teachers are saying way off elsewhere that to me sound just crazy mm-hmm. and absurd, and I cannot imagine why any person would think that that is a good idea.
Right.
And yet it appears that those things are happening, but not here.
Yeah, I mean, critical race theory is an interesting one too to jump into, because it's like to me it's one of those issues that's not really an issue. I don't think there's any district in the country that's actually teaching CRT at this point. I mean, it's more of an academic principle. Where it gets to be complicated and tricky for districts like Kerrville is like, well, how do you, if you're going to talk about history, how do you explain, like B.T. Wilson's role, in the district's history? Is that an example of critical race theory? I would say not. I would say it's historic and it's just part of our past.
I would say recognizing B.T. Wilson, and I never met the man, but I was his wife's physician mm-hmm. for several years.
Yeah.
Itasca Wilson, wonderful, wonderful lady. She's passed on now. But what our community did with honoring his legacy mm-hmm. by naming a sixth grade campus after him, I think tells the story in some part of what our community is like.
Yeah, right. And Kerrville was actually one of the first districts to integrate in the 60s. It took a while to get, once Brown versus Board of Education went into place, was actually fairly early. And there's a wonderful letter from a Tybee principal to Dwight D. Eisenhower, encouraging him to integrate schools, which is interesting too. So there's a lot with that. But
I was not aware of that, but I would love to read that.
Yeah, that's a true story. It's in the National Archives. It's a wonderful letter, and from the principal in 1957.
How about that?
And but the things that are going on here too, we talked about this a little bit. I think that the bigger problems are the growing pain problems that we're seeing, where you have we have a housing market, and Andrew Gay's a financial guy, and we're going to blame it on Andrew. It's just really hot right now. And most teachers are going to come in here and make $50,000, $60,000 a year, or $51,000, $52,000 to start off with. I think that just isn't enough, even to rent at this point. So
there are challenges in our community and challenges statewide in teaching and teachers.
Yeah.
In our community, affordable housing is a big challenge.
Right.
The hospital faces the same challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They have nurses who want to come to Kerrville and work at for the Peterson system as a nurse, start looking at housing and can't find what they can afford.
Right.
Our district faces the same way. On a statewide level, fewer and fewer people are graduating college and going into teaching.
Yeah.
That is going to be a challenge. We feel it locally, but as a state, our state is and will continue to do that. What's the solution for that? And then the amount of state enforced regulations,
Mm-hmm.
whether those are great or poor, they are required by the state, helps lead to teacher burnout and
Right.
teacher frustration, and understandably so.
One of the more fascinating conversations, I think this last meeting was really interesting because I have not been able to go to all of the meetings, but the ones I go to, there's always underlying element when you get to the resignations and the retirements, and there's always like under the breath, like housing from Dr. Fouts, the superintendent of schools. This last meeting, though, was interesting on multiple levels because, one, you had the survey from the employees,
Mm-hmm.
and where most of them said, I feel pretty good about where I'm doing, I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at, but there was also this sort of underlying exhaustion from a lot of teachers.
And I think the COVID, starting with spring of 2020
Mm-hmm.
and virtual teaching,
Right.
and then all the catching up from
Right.
lost learning,
Right.
parents were working hard and diligently in that spring, and then ones who kept their kids home for the fall of 2020 were working hard and diligently, the great majority of them. However, I think most parents would say, some of this stuff I just don't understand the best way to teach it to my child,
Right.
or I do not have the time to teach it to my child. I think most parents in our district are very happy with how our teachers are teaching.
Right. And I think that's the other interesting part of that, too, is that you're talking about the unfunded sort of mandates. There was a initiative called the Science of Reading, and it was supposed to take like 60 hours of training. It was for like pre-K through third grade. And it was really intensive, to learn the psychology and the brain structure of learning of reading. But it has been not easy to complete.
Teachers say it takes a lot more time than that. I have a daughter who's she's in her 10th year of being an elementary school
Mm-hmm.
teacher in Canyon ISD outside of Amarillo.
Yeah.
So I hear from her, and I hear what teachers here locally are saying,
Yeah.
and that was a much greater challenge and continues to be a much greater challenge than originally
Right.
thought or portrayed by when the state enforced that upon us.
Right. Any hope of getting your daughter out of Amarillo? We can get her down here and to work down here in this district. Can we get her down here?
Well,
Because Amarillo is really smelly.
I think she's pretty happy up there.
All right. Okay.
But we would welcome her back with open arms to this area.
I love Amarillo. It's just as an aside here because you know what? I love that crazy steakhouse, and two, the fact that they have like a 30-story building, and that's where Dr. Phil's from, as well. So I mean, it's a fascinating place to go visit.
She and her husband went to Texas Tech, met there, and so they kind of have an.
So Amarillo, Lubbock, that's kind of the deal. I get you. I love the fact that Lubbock is Texas Tech. Every time I've been to Lubbock a few times, and I was stunned at the size of Texas Tech. Like, oh my God, the campus is gigantic. And you can see it being even bigger down the road here. After 24 years of being on the school board, though, do you ever think to yourself, well, I'd rather spend my Monday nights somewhere else once a month, or do you enjoy the work, or what drives you to continue to want to run for re-election?
I think that Kerrville is a great place to live, and I think that Kerrville ISD is a great school system.
Yeah.
And I still have a lot of enthusiasm to continue to use my years of experience and perspective and wisdom to help our district get better and better. I love our community, and I love being of service to something other than just focused on my career or focused on myself. You know, when I first got on the school board, I had other school board members who had more years of experience than I did. Three I'll mention are Judge Keith Williams, Virginia Graham, Judge Rob Kelly. Before they were judges,
Right.
they were school board members when I first got on the school board. They had lots of experience that I depended on and gained from.
Right.
And I think that now, at this length of tenure on my school board service, I have that to offer to our school board, and then by extension, offer that to our school system and our community.
And you get members on the board now that have been there on the board for several years. You know, most of them have. There hasn't been we've talked about this before. There hasn't been really an election in a decade because I think there's been this sort of satisfaction with the way the board has been run. Now there's a race, which is the first time, which I guess is a good thing, you know, to kind of keep things sort of fresh and bring it out in front of the voters. But, I mean, you work with Rolinda Schmidt, who's heavily involved with the stuff at the state level as well, right?
Yes, supporting public education on the state level and trying to lobby, so to speak,
Right.
or suggest policy to the Texas Education Agency, to the Texas legislature to make public schools better.
Right.
Part of that is funding. Part of that is what we talked about of unfunded mandates. But she serves a valuable role to our community, but also to the school children of our state.
When the board talks, I mean, it's interesting to listen to the conversations that you guys have amongst yourselves. I always put a lot of weight into what Andrew Hayes says, who sits to your right on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew comes in here all the time and has coffee and does crosswords. But
she's a great lady.
I mean, she's great, right? What does she offer? I mean, she offers that for a perspective.
She has her entire career in education and public education, and she always has her ear to the ground, or kind of has her eye somewhat focused on, not solely, but has the perspective of a career educator and how teachers see things and teachers think about things.
Right.
Her daughter actually works in our school district in elementary school,
right.
and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, because you're on that side of the table there, where you have you're kind of wedged between Greg Peschel, whose I think wife teaches in the district as well, and then Andrew Hayes, whose daughter's in the district.
And you know, speaking of Greg Peschel, you brought up how long I've been on the board.
Yeah.
I have no. I find nothing that I need to defend for
Right,
that.
right.
People vote with their feet.
Yeah.
And how long Ms. Schmidt's been on the board. We also have Greg Peschel, who's completed 1 year on the board.
1 year, right.
We have Mike Tackett, who's completed 3 years on the board.
Right.
So we have a wide variety of lengths of tenure and lengths of service. I don't think any organization would want to be solely with people who are 60 or over, and I don't think any organization would want to be solely who people have served by 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years of experience.
Right.
So I think we have a good mix.
It's a good mix of folks too, and you know, Peschel replaced Marty Leonard, who went on to work down in New Braunfels, who was like probably one of those guys who you were on the board and he was probably graduating.
I maybe handed him his diploma, and then he was the band director,
right?
And then he was a fellow board member. He is a fantastic guy.
I miss that guy.
I do too.
It was great to have him around.
He gave the teacher perspective also.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is interesting though is essentially, you know, the idea that we're kind of, you know, if you look at the population of the student body, it's pretty stable. There's not really a huge number of new students, but we could get there, you know. And what is the sense of the board and the district about, you know, growth? You know, I mean, it could get big in a hurry here, because one of the things I always hear from people too, especially people who grew up here, like, oh, what a great place to come back and bring my family and raise my kids here, and you know, and honestly, like I had my grandsons here last year, and I thought, man, these guys would thrive here. You know, they would do really well in the schools. There's so many activities for kids, and you know, we're sort of kid focused in a lot of ways. Some people say not. I think it is.
I would say for certain our school board and school district are kids focused. On when we sit on up at the table during a school board meeting, there's a name plaque that you know, faces the attendees with each school board member's name on it. On the back of it, it says children first.
Right.
We never forget that children first. It's not teachers first. It's not administrators first. It is certainly not school board members first. It's children first.
Right.
Has been the focus. Now, you mentioned growth. During my time on the board, the school district population has grown slowly but steadily.
Yeah.
Sometimes not with population growth of people moving here, but oftentimes with students who their parents want them to transfer in.
Right.
Transfer in from other areas that are close but geographically outside the boundaries of Kerrville ISD.
Right.
Thinking of forethinking, going way back to the construction of what many people still call the new high school.
Right.
Okay. That bond passed in 1999, I think, and then it opened a few years after that. It was built with the forethinking of making the hallways wide enough to accomplish a greater number of students, making the locker room, the weight room, the cafeteria, the kitchen big enough to accomplish a greater number of students, with the ability, the pad, that's probably not the correct construction term, but the dirt that sits right outside several of the wings of the buildings was prepared to accommodate 4 more classrooms,
right,
or 6 more classrooms. Already has the foundation laid if more classroom space is needed.
Right.
So that's one example of thinking for the future.
And what was it like for you to be on that board when Peterson Middle School opened? And that had to be, and that's one of the most impressive public buildings.
That is something that our community can take great pride in.
Mm-hmm.
We hear in the news about Company A or Company B deciding they're going to relocate to Kerrville.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Bring more jobs, bring well-paying jobs. Nobody wants, I don't think, Kerrville to turn into Bernie. So
right.
There's the fine line of walking that. But we drive, on family vacations, I drive through parts of West Texas and see towns that seem to have just withered on the
right.
vine over
right.
the last 30 or 50 years.
Right.
And I don't think any of us want that for Kerrville either. But having a great school system, which does not solely depend on new school facilities, but those certainly play a role.
Right.
Having a great school system, I think, is something that attracts. You talked about people wanting to, I've kind of lived in San Antonio for 12 years, and now my kids are young, and I don't want them going to school in San Antonio,
right.
and I'm tired of fighting the traffic. Maybe I'll move back to Kerrville.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that can attract people here. The academic performance of our district is extremely, extremely good. Can I give you a couple examples?
Yeah, sure,
okay.
Absolutely.
For high school graduates, the state makes an assessment of every high school in the state of Texas. They call it post-secondary readiness. It's basically, as a high school graduate from every high school in the state of Texas, how prepared are they for career, military, trade school, college. Mm-hmm. They call it post-secondary readiness. And the state does an assessment of that and gives a ranking to every high school. The highest ranking is distinction.
Right.
There's 1,029 school districts in the state of Texas. There's many more high schools than that. Every high school has a ranking. Kerrville ISD, Tybee High School, is one of only 5 high schools, 5 districts in the entire 1,029 districts who had achieved the distinction ranking 5 years in a row.
Wow.
That is the upper echelon of the upper echelon. That's not the sole way to measure that. A couple of other examples. For the last 9 years, Tybee Kerrville ISD has had a 0% dropout rate. Now, obviously, that includes the good work that Mr. Schwartz and his gang are doing over at Hill Country High School.
Yeah.
Because some kids reach that age and the regular channels of public school and going to class, first period, second period, et cetera, that's not for them, and they would thrive better in another format.
Having that competence continuation element is so important.
It's not a GED. It's an actual high school diploma.
Right.
Nobody has slipped through the cracks. 100% high school graduation rate. Our district performs better than state average and our region's average on the state-required standardized testing. If we like standardized testing or hate standardized testing, still it's required.
Right.
So everybody's got to be tested, and our district does better than state and regional average on that. For the kids in high school who take SAT and ACT, our school district does better than state and regional averages on that. We're always striving to get better. you always want to work on having our school district do a better job, and that's what our school.
I mean,
board has been doing.
there's always these stories too that we hear of kids that have gone through these schools, and they've gone on to Harvard, or they've gone on to the Ivy League, or they've gone to the big Texas schools and they've thrived and they've come back and they've done really great things. There's a lot of great stories here. What's going on in Kerrville on the education level,
and you have a lot of great stories also of people who decided then or later that college or further education was not for them, started their own business, and have been very successful here doing that. Obviously, I went to college. I think that it would be a great idea to have college be affordable.
Right.
I went to an affordable college. I was a graduate of Baylor University that is very, very expensive now. It was not nearly that expensive when I was there.
Believe me, let me tell you, I know how expensive it is.
However,
my bills due this month. So,
however, I went my first 2 years to a community college.
Yeah.
Lived at home, had a part-time job. Some people thrive going to college, and other people say, you know what, I'm ready to do my own thing, and they are very successful too. Not everybody needs to go to college,
exactly.
But we want to have all our graduates prepared. That we do not want to limit the options for our graduates. We would like all of our graduates to be prepared for whichever avenue they might choose after graduation.
Great. He is Dr. David Sprouse. He's running for school board, and that is it's District 6 or position
District 6.
District 6 in the school board. That is I live in the particular district. I got a nice card from you the other day. Thank you very much for stopping by. We appreciate it very much. Now you have to go back to work. You have to go take care of people now too. So
that's fun to do also.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Sprouse. Good luck on the election. We'll talk to you after the election, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Next up, you're good. You two, come on now.
Hey, good. I bet you got my card too, didn't you?
And I voted before lunchtime.
Did you? Nice. Good job.
Good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Oh, and you're getting some.
How are you, Gilbert?
Good morning, sir. I'm doing good. How are you?
What's the news with the market? What's going on? What's happening so far?
Well, I think it would be an understatement to say that things haven't been volatile. It's been very volatile, especially last week. We had a good old-fashioned butt kicking.
Like what's driving that butt kicking?
Well, part